Podcast, a platform created to entertain, educate, and evolve the modern-day deer hunter. Yeah, so Chad Sylvester on the phone with me from Exodus Trail Cameras. Part business owner of Exodus Trail Cameras, kind of a new age company as far as the way you guys market and operate. Mm-hmm. And you and your group of guys that operate Exodus are, I'll identify you guys as blue collar guys who got into the hunting industry and just some hardcore deer hunters. I know you guys do a mix of public and private. Yep. And typically anytime me and you have ever got to talk, it's usually a huge rush, get whatever subjects covered that we need to talk about. But it's nice to be able to actually have to fill some time up here and get some details on Exodus and what's coming up for your hunting season. So I'm looking forward to talking.
Awesome, man. Yeah, it's I know we've been trying to schedule this for a while. We've bounced back and forth a little bit. You offered to come down here, and things didn't work out in August. And then I was up in Michigan, I think in September, and it just didn't work out. I was over in Grand Rapids, and you had some stuff going on, and so this has been a long time coming. So it's glad to finally connect and sit down and chat.
Yeah, I know you guys have been crazy busy. I've been crazy busy, and yeah, we tried all summer to coordinate just a day, and we could not make it happen. But I figure we'll, after hunting season wraps up, when the shows are going on, we'll hook up some weekend and we'll be able to sit down and do this again and cover some other stuff. But yeah, I felt that it was necessary to talk, and I had some camera related questions to you, and really I've just been eager to pick any and everyone's brains right now about deer hunting. As we're into season now, people are hunting, and I don't know about you, but my season this year is looking like way different than it ever has before. One, to obviously starting a deer hunting podcast and now having that going while deer hunting, and then two, I'm kind of changing up my whole seasonal approach from some information. Obviously I attained a ton of information talking with so many different people about deer hunting over the last 6 or 8 months, and it's really opened my eyes to some historic mistakes that I've made that I want to try to correct this year. And I started to see a little bit of change last year as I was following different people and reading different things and listening to deer hunting podcasts, and I'm interested to continue my growth this year and reflect on some of the things I saw last year. And man, I'm just we got a lot of different things going on. I did a lot more work, a lot more preparatory work throughout the off season this year, and I feel pretty good about going into late October, November this year, more so than I ever have in the past. That's for sure.
That's awesome, man. That's exciting to hear. It's with this day and age, even outside of being in the industry, I don't think there's ever been a time or era in the deer hunting world where there was more information at your fingertips. And obviously being in the industry, or yourself as a host of the deer hunting podcast, and talking to industry professionals and guys of the likes of Mark Kenyon and Dan Infall, guys that are a vast array of men who are hunting on public or private, getting it done in various ways. You have all the wealth of knowledge, at your fingertips as well. So it's cool to listen to you and see how you progress as a deer hunter and how you're sharing that with your audience. It's pretty awesome, man.
Thanks for saying that. Yeah, I always noticed, a lot of the platforms and things that I followed, and not all, but most of them always came off. I think a lot of things in deer hunting and just in life in general is that people don't want to admit that they are not like professionals at this. It's like nobody wants to follow or pay attention to a guy who says, well, I don't really know, or I'm just learning. They want to follow somebody. Obviously, there's a reason that a guy like you brought up Dan Infalt's name. There's a reason that guy's so successful. I mean, he is a professional at the highest level, and I wasn't gonna like pretend that's who I was. When I started this, it was to showcase that even though I've been deer hunting for 20 years, I consider myself somewhat of a rookie compared to guys that are doing it at a real high level. So this platform was a platform for potentially guys that feel that they could be in the same situation where they love deer hunting, they've been doing it for a long time, but they know and they feel that they have a lot of room to grow, where we could all come together and do that on common ground.
Yeah, absolutely. I think just by you being kind of open and transparent, it's very humble of you to be that way with your audience, and I think that probably resonates at the highest level. And there's a lot of guys out there that respect what you're saying and being transparent the way that you are. So you're absolutely right, though. There's and let me get this out before we even get too much further. I'm in the same boat as you. I am by no means a giant, a whitetail giant slayer. I have killed a couple big deer, but not at all on a consistent basis. The evolution of myself as a hunter, I grow and grow and grow each year, much like yourself, gathering tidbits from, guys across the industry. The one thing that I've learned over the past couple of years since Matt, myself, and my brother Steve has started Exodus trail cameras. I think everybody, obviously most guys, I'm going to say 90% of guys want to kill big deer, whether they admit that or not. And to be truthful, guys don't have the ability to just because on the land that they're on, or maybe the area that they hunt, or maybe the constraints, maybe they have to work a 40-hour a week job and they don't get any vacation time during November. So they don't have the ability, to go out of state if they're in West Virginia or Virginia or in a non-big buck state. Maybe there is something there holding them back. But, so many guys and guys in the industry, everybody wants to be known as something, and everybody wants to be known, maybe put on a show to gain the approval of their peers. And that's just not the way we are here at Exodus. I mean, we're just normal blue collar guys, like you had said in the intro, just trying to make a difference in the industry. And we run this business just the way our grandfathers would run a construction company. I mean, we try to do everything to where, when we lay our heads down at night, we could sleep with a good conscience and wake up the next day and do it all over again.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to get into Exodus, but real quick before we do, I kind of want to set the stage on how you got to this point. So fill me in and fill the listeners in, from, probably when I'm imagining your situation's somewhere common to mine. You possibly started deer hunting. I don't know. Did you start deer hunting with family around the early teenage years, and then, kind of what you did through college and work before you made the huge commitment and step to essentially be an entrepreneur and start a business?
Yeah. Some of that is similar to my upbringing, I guess. I started hunting probably 11, 12, 13 years old. I was raised on a family farm. We have about 500 acres here in Northeast Ohio, which used to be about one of the best areas in Ohio to deer hunt. Just a prime farm, everything you could imagine. So yeah, I started hunting as a family pastime. Everybody in my family was, they were all busy making a living, supporting their families. So there wasn't a whole lot of serious deer hunting going on in the mid '90s, at least in my family. It was more of a family tradition or ritual. The week of gun season, opening day, everyone took off school. Everybody took off work a couple of days. And we would hit the woods for a few days, and then we would go, life would go back to normal, and then we would finish up, Saturday, Sunday, or Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And that was pretty much it. And it was that way for, probably my first 4 seasons. And then just by dumb luck, at the age of 16, I had killed 177-inch deer on a drive. It was the very last Saturday. It was the closing day of I'm trying to think if that was 98 or 90. Must have been 98 or 99. But anyhow, deer got pushed to me. I shot a couple times, hit it a couple times. And later recovered it about 20 minutes later. It's a super long story, but killing a deer that big, of that caliber, pretty much changed my life as a deer hunter forever. From that point on, then the following year I started archery hunting. And from that point on, just, everyone told me, oh, you'll never do that again. That's once in a lifetime. You'll never kill another buck like that. And I've always been one for, even at a young age, I was always for one. When people told me I couldn't do something, I would do it just out of spite. So I became kind of obsessed with mature deer. And at that time, I didn't know what a mature deer was. I just knew I killed a big buck, and everybody was super excited about it, and it didn't happen all the time. So I just tried to repeat that process, and I failed miserably. Made so many mistakes along the way. It was absolutely ridiculous. But that's how, as you said, that's how we evolve as a hunter. So from after the time I killed, that was my very first deer too. Not only my first buck.
That was your first deer.
First deer.
Wow.
So
yeah, for anybody that's listening, they can find you on Facebook, and they can see photos of it, right? You have photos on your Facebook of it?
There probably is some photos on Facebook floating around. I know there's a couple maybe on Instagram. I know there's a couple on Instagram. I'm not sure if there's anything on Facebook or not, but
gotcha.
I
just knew that I had seen the photo of the deer before.
Yeah, if I'm in all orange coveralls, and I look like a little kid, that'd be the deer. Yep.
Right.
Yep. But so after that, through the rest of my teenage years, I was just trying to repeat that accomplishment. And like I said, I failed miserably. But from the time I was 18 to until 25, 26, I really took a hiatus from the deer hunting world. I still hunted, but it just wasn't at the same level as it was before. It was more or less muzzleloader hunting, really around the holidays and a few days late archery season through January. I had taken the opportunity to play football at Youngstown State University after high school, and playing at that level obviously consumes a lot of time, especially through the fall. So my time was very limited on that end. And then beyond that, I actually pursued a professional rodeo career.
You
in
did?
the PRCA. Yeah, from the time I was 21 till I met my wife until I was 27, I guess. So for about 6 years, I had an RCA card. Went to some touring events, some challenger deals in the PBR. So essentially, I guess that's my life story from the time I was 13 to 26, I guess. Beyond that, when I met my wife, I knew I wanted to kind of settle down a little bit, and I went to work for my father, who owned a engineering and construction company. And eventually that led me into the telecommunication world, which then led into the start of Exodus Outdoor Gear, which is essentially right now Exodus trail cameras.
Awesome. I have to ask real quick what you were doing playing football, what position?
I got recruited to play safety, and I ended up playing linebacker. So I was fast, I was quick, but I have the hips and the feet of a white man. So
I was going to say you're a big safety. I've stood next to you.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I ended up playing linebacker for a few years, which was a lot of fun. It was a good time.
Yeah, I bet. No, you didn't suffer any major injuries through. You were lucky to escape college football without any kind of major injuries, and there was no thinking that you were going to try to make a run at going pro, or?
Oh my gosh, no injuries. I mean, it's a violent collision sport, so I mean, there's always bruises and sprains and bumps, but nothing major.
Good.
Yeah, and I was not even close enough to even close enough to be considered an NFL player. I mean, those guys are on a whole nother level. It's I played at the 1AA level, but I can imagine trying to make it to the league. Those guys are just it's insane, the talent level they have.
Yeah, they're not hardly human.
I know.
Yeah, I followed you all through the summer. You're really putting you're actually making me feel like a lazy asshole. The amount of miles that you were running, and I'd get up and roll out of bed and open my eyes and look at my phone, and you're like, I'm doing burpees and shooting my bow, and I'm like, I'm still in bed. But I see they've toned down. I don't know if you just went quiet with them or if you've been busy.
Yeah, once it's I've been slacking. Exercise to me is just a kind of a release. It's just a way for me to kind of forget about everything and let the stress go away a little bit. But no, we get so busy come August, September, just getting into quarter 3 and quarter 4 into the heart of hunting season and holiday season with the business. It just consumes. It almost consumes your life. There's times where you just have to say, okay, enough's enough. You have to go spend some time with the family. So
yeah,
it gets tough around this time of the year.
Yeah, between my full-time job and then doing this, I've caught myself a couple times like, whoa, chill out, dude. This is not who you want to be and not how you want to be living life. That's
exactly.
It's okay. Just you did this because it's going to be fun. But I think it's just, competitive nature. I played soccer up through college. I was a competitive athlete as well. Mm-hmm. And I think you find that a lot in the hunting industry. You find a lot of competitive people.
Yes.
And that's one of the reasons, I guess, why, I don't know, the hunting industry exists in the manner that it is. It's definitely something that my eyes have been opened to. I'm sure, you look at hunting a lot different now, too, after working in the hunting industry for a long time. I just always envisioned it as, a bunch of deer hunters and people are doing deer hunting things related to deer hunting and making money and a living off of them. But the long and short of it is it's a business place. And at the end of the day, it's all about business. And your eyes can be opened pretty quickly as to how competitive of a place that it is.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's very cutthroat. But it's at the same time, it is a great industry. I think I think a lot of the problem lies sometimes is when people kind of pursue their passion and they get romantic about the idea of doing something that they love and would dream about. Then when it comes to fruition, it's not always the way it seems, if that makes sense.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, well, firsthand the amount of work that has to go in to actually be able to make a living off of it, support a family off of it is unreal. There's
Yeah.
easier ways to make money, right?
Oh my gosh, you're absolutely. If it's insane the amount of work that goes in. At least I can't speak for any other business owner, but I know what we do on a daily, and the amount of time and effort is insane. There are a lot easier and more profitable ways to make money than being in the hunting and outdoor industry. I can almost promise you that.
Yep. So you said you got yourself into telecommunications, and that's kind of how Exodus started. So, give me kind of the detailed thing. I've heard it before. I've heard Matt speak on it.
Mm-hmm.
But how it came about from like the initial thought. I mean, usually when these things happen, one person has an initial thought and they bring it up to another person, and you start brainstorming on it, and then it could actually grow legs, and in your case it seemed to. Do you remember like where that initial thought sparked from, and how that conversation started, and how it grew its legs to be what it is now?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I guess it really started back in 2014. Matt and I were actually on a lease together in Southern Ohio. So he was living in Maryland at the time. He was driving about 5.5 hours, 6 hours over, driving west to this lease. And I was driving about 5.5 hours south. And, there were 6 gentlemen on the lease, and Matt and I were the youngest 2 guys. So we kind of had a natural bond, I guess. We donated a lot of boot leather to that place that summer. But, driving back and forth every other weekend, it seemed like every time we got down there, we were just having issues with our equipment that we were using. And I guess the heart of that was, running trail cameras, a large number of trail cameras. We were on about 1,400 acres. And I think between the two of us, we probably had about 20 cameras down there. And it just seemed like every time down there was some type of problem. And we were running a multitude of brands. It wasn't, it wasn't just one specific model or one specific brand. And then we were just frustrated with the customer and product support that, when we did have when we did have an issue, it just seemed like no one really cared to help us. And that was frustrating to us, but that's what we expected. That's all that we knew. So as time went on that fall, Matt and I had talked about several different business opportunities, real estate and different types of investments and different things. And, at the time, like you said, I was working at a telecom firm, which I absolutely hated with a passion. I was managing new construction builds for carriers and tower companies, and it was the worst job I've ever had in my entire life. So I was already looking for something else. I just wasn't sure what. So later that year, Matt had brought up the idea of doing something in the outdoor and hunting industry, and specifically with trail cameras. And he had been doing some research on why and what were the most likely causes of trail camera failure, and researching componentry and manufacturers. So he had a jump on this idea before he had brought it up to me. And then when he kind of pitched me on it, it was a pretty easy sell. I said, yeah, let's put our heads together and let's do a little bit of legwork and research and see if there's something viable there. So about after 5 or 6 months, we thought, yeah, there's something here. We could do something different. We think we could do something better. Um, let's go for it. So at that time, we had brought my brother in as the third co-founder, and then started and founded Exodus Outdoor Gear in January 2015. So that's kind of how the company, or the idea of Exodus, got started. It was really just out of frustrations we had as consumers.
Yeah, I know them. I know the exact frustrations that you're speaking upon because I dealt with them for many years. And then it would have been 2 years ago, I suppose, when I heard your partner Matt Klein on a podcast talking about your camera. And let's just say Matt's a pretty smooth talker, right?
Yep, absolutely.
And the things that he was saying all resonated to me and all made sense. And it was like perfect timing. I actually had just, well, it's kind of a catastrophic disaster, but it was part of the whole situation. I had a flood in my house, and obviously the insurance company covered it. And I decided to do the reconstruction myself versus paying a contractor. So I was able to take those funds and, like, do nicer flooring and nicer countertops and things of that nature. And so at this particular day, when I heard Matt talking about the trail cameras, I had, some extra money in my bank account, and I thought, the wife probably won't notice if a couple $100 get paid out to Exodus Outdoor Gear. So I bought a camera, and from day one when I got that thing, I was just like, man, this thing's different. It's nice. I recognized it the second I got it, like the thought, and it's not like a big deal. And I don't know that anybody else cares as much as I do, but for whatever reason, when I got the thing and it wasn't wrapped in plastic that I had to go through some type of epic battle and find 3 different tools to get it out of, it was in like this nice, like, thought out box that I still use today to keep like the camera and the camera parts and the manuals and all that stuff. I just recognized that more thought and more cost that could probably be potentially going in the business's pocket was going into the product. And I guess I should clarify too, like, I've been in sales for a long time. Even though I'm a plumber and a contractor, I sell all my own jobs. I handle all my customer relationships. I do all my billing. I'm almost somewhat of a subcontractor to the company that I'm employed through. So, I've been through sales classes for years and that type of training, and I see the numbers at our business, and just business models in general is something that I've paid attention to for years. So when I got your product and I saw and I thought, like, this is thoughtful of these guys to do, and this is nicer than anything that I've ever had my hands on, as far as and I'll say this too, I'm not a big spender. Like, I like to buy nice stuff. I won't like waste money on garbage, but I'm very decisive when I do go to spend money on a product. I try to do a lot of research on it, and if I feel that something is worth, the extra money, then I will pull the trigger on that. But, typically I'm pretty frugal. Like, I'll use a sawzall blade, just something as simple as that. I have a pack of 6 of them in the truck that are brand new, and I'll be struggling with a blade that's like super dull, and the guys always be like, just go grab another blade. It's like, this one's got a couple more cuts in it, I like to get my money's worth out of things. And this camera, when I got it, I really felt that was it. I initially spent some extra money, more money than I ever spent on a trail camera, but I felt that I got a far superior product. And, from there, I just kind of started to pay attention to what you guys were doing, And I guess it was, right around the time where I kind of recognized in my head that I maybe wanted to try to do something in the outdoor industry too. So, I kind of paid attention to, I guess, your guys' personal, what I'll deem as like a pretty personal business model. And the Lift 1, to this day, I have a couple of the new cameras. Man, I trust that thing. I don't have a doubt in my mind that when I go to pull the card, that I'll have an issue with it. And that to me is the complete opposite of every other experience I've ever had with any other trail camera.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I appreciate those words, man. That's humbling to hear. To your point, the Lift One, that's what that was our debut camera. That was our first camera that we had launched back in 2015. That thing was a tank. It's exactly what you described. It's a camera that you could set up and just forget about it. It's going to work. 99.9% of the time, there's not going to be a problem with that camera. You set it, forget about it. And really, a lot of what you described, the personal touch, the extra thought, the money spent on the product, really evolves around our business model. We are a consumer direct company, so we do not have a retail or resellers program, and that the business model is key for everything that we do, from product development to manufacturing to customer support. It is the lifeblood of our company. It allows us to spend more money on the componentry of the camera. So the lifespan of the camera is actually increased because of that. We're able to then back it up with one of the industry's best warranties. We guarantee our cameras for 5 years, and then the big thing is, we do go the extra mile for our customers because that's who we serve. We don't, we're not in business to serve the big box stores, the big sporting goods or the Cabela's or Bass Pros of the world. We're there to support the people who are actually buying and using our products, and that's everyday people. There's times where we take calls at 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock at night, just because we want to treat people the way we think they should be treated. And a lot of people think, well, you can't run a business that way. There's no way to scale that. You might be able to do that for a year or two, but it's not scalable. It'll never happen. Well, I don't know. This is our third year in business and we're still going at it. So, I guess it goes back to that saying, when people tell us we can't do something, we do it out of spite. So.
Yeah. And you mentioned, you made the statement, one of the, best warranties in the industry. And I think I'm pretty comfortable now saying, and all the research that we've done and everything that we've looked at on our end, that you guys are by far the industry standard, as far as like, or far above the industry standard of what other trail cameras provide for warranties. I think I found a couple cameras maybe that carried 2-year warranties, but even the other real high dollar upper echelon camera on the market only carries a 1-year warranty, which I was pretty surprised of. But I get it, they're electrical components and they sit out in the elements, but that 5-year warranty is huge. Yeah, it's I guess a big step, or a big thing for you guys to take on, and have to stand up to. And you guys have backed up every single word that you have said to us thus so far. And 5 years, to know that a camera is going to work 5 years. So even if I get 5 years out of the thing, I feel like paying the extra, let's say $100. Let's say there's a lot of trail cameras around the price point of $100, right? You can go pretty much to any resale place and pick up a pretty nice camera for $100, but it's going to carry a 1 year warranty. And in my experience, I was always lucky to get a couple years. Now I have heard guys say, well, I've gotten, 6 or 8 years out of this camera, and that's great, but it's just nice to know that I'm assured that I'm going to get at least 5 out of this.
Right. Yeah, the warranty is an attraction for a lot of people. We think that should be the standard. There's if three blue collar guys can put their heads together and come up with a better mechanical design of the exterior shell of a camera, and then be able to have the idea to be consumer direct and buy higher grade componentry to put the cameras together, there's absolutely zero things holding other companies back from building better products, other than they're built and designed with an obsolescence mindset, where they're only designed and built to last a few months outside of their warranty, because they know, after 14 months, that camera is more than likely going to fail, and you'll be back to buy another one. Because in this day and age, trail cameras, they're almost becoming a necessary tool rather than a luxury. When these things first came out or became digital 17, 18, 19 years ago, not everybody used trail cameras. There was, it was the new thing to do. There was guys using them and experimenting with them. But you fast forward 15, 16 years, and I don't have one friend or acquaintance that does not have cameras in the woods, because they provide so much value as far as time saving. I mean, they're out there scouting for you 24/7 when you're not in the woods. They just became, a necessity. And I don't know how anybody truthfully can justify not having them, as far as, spending time in the woods. I know if I did not run cameras, my scouting, I don't even know what I would do, honestly. I've ran them for so long. I'm not sure what I would do. And at the same time, there's an argument there where it hinders people too. And I can definitely see the argument there, where the sense of woodsmanship and some of those skills have been lost because people are now becoming dependent on technology. So there's definitely an argument there on both sides. But we're glad to see the trail camera market where it is, and we're glad to be a part of, be one of those companies who are kind of raising the bar for everyone else to follow.
Yeah, I think that there's a very small group of people, like you just said, losing the woodsmanship, that have the patience and the skill set, and their brains just seem to work differently to be able to go into the woods and locate tracks. And I've met a few of those guys, and I've talked to a few of those guys, and I've certainly read their stuff and listened to them, and they're just their brain just works differently than mine. And I think for most people, myself included, camera is an extremely valuable tool, because I've seen a lot of deer tracks, and if I go to my food plot and I see some good tracks, it's pretty hard for me to tell, well, this is a 3-year-old buck, and this is a 6-year-old buck, and this is just a big doe. To me, there's big tracks and little tracks.
Right.
That's about as far as, I can tell you that one's big and that one's little. But, there's other guys that'll they can tell you where that deer, how old it is, where it's going, what it's doing. It's pretty crazy. But I know what you're saying about that skill set being lost. But I just think in general, most people that deer hunt nowadays don't have time to have or invest in that type of skill set. And aside from trail cameras being a valuable tool, they're just extremely fun.
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of those things that, when people say the whitetail season never ends, it's, running cameras, you could run cameras for other things, and it can truly extend the enjoyment of the outdoors 365. I know we run all of our cameras 365 days a year. We run them postseason. The only time that we may take them down just to bring them in and clean them up is kind of after we know bucks have dropped their antlers, and that time between shed season and turkey season, maybe 2 weeks, maybe 10, 14 days, we'll bring our cameras in, clean them up, and then get them back out there and use them for turkey season, and then leave them out for velvet. So you're right, it's a lot of fun pulling those cameras, pulling cards, and just being curious if this deer showed up, or if you got a new buck on camera, or maybe you have history with another deer that you didn't have on camera last year. Maybe he comes back this year. So it's always a surprise and something to look forward to.
Yeah, and it's fun to just like it is when you're hunting, to find a good spot and to set up a tree stand, and you're like, this is a good setup. It's fun like that on the level of a camera too, right? Getting, you're like, that camera's in an okay spot, but once you really start using them and you've been doing it for a couple of years, you're like, yeah, this is a badass camera setup. We're gonna get some good photos off of this.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's funny. I've actually never thought of it that way. But you're exactly right. There's times where I go out and set cameras up, and it's like, this is an okay spot. I might, I probably won't have any giants or any big deer on camera, but I might catch something cruising through here, and then there's other times you set a camera up based off topography or food or something, on a saddle or a bench, and you're like, oh my gosh, this is an awesome spot. So I never thought of it that way, but you're 100% right.
Yeah, it gives you the ability to see inside a world that you could otherwise never see in, and especially when we're talking about mature bucks, right? You can't go into that area without affecting it. The only time you potentially can is maybe one time, maybe a couple times, but I mean, really a truly mature deer is not going to tolerate your presence. So if you go in there, like you just said, around turkey season, and you put a camera in, and that thing's there all year, maybe you're in there one or two times a year to get a card, or to change the batteries or whatnot, but there's just no way without that tool that you could ever see inside that that section of woods or that world where that deer lives, and it's really eye-opening.
No, that's a great point, and that's something that a lot of people don't realize, and something that I personally did not do until we started this company. And obviously, owning a trail camera company, you have quite a few cameras at your disposal, so not everybody could use this tactic. But especially in the big woods, Matt and I will set cameras up in a spot. Come middle of September, we'll go in and set a camera up, and we will leave it with no intentions of ever going back to even checking it until the season is over, not until February, March. And we will go in and pull the cards, take the cameras down, whatever we want to do, and then we'll gather that data for the next season. Because what we find is, as you said, Matt and I both, we've on a mix of public and private, but more public than private. And what we find is there are some annual patterns going on with mature deer. One of them being, once they become hard-horned and the bachelor groups break up and they find their fall range, we find that some of those deer are relocating into the same general areas around the same time of year, as long as the food source and cover is remaining somewhat constant. And then we also find that same annual pattern during the rut. We find that we've been running cameras in areas for 3+ years, and almost to the day we have the same buck coming back year after year to scrape areas, scent checking doe bedding areas. So I totally understand that not everyone has the luxury of using cameras in that nature, just purchasing cameras and not ever checking them, putting them out and never checking them. But, if there's ever a time where anyone has a camera at their disposal and it's not being used, and there's always, if there's an area that you have thought about checking out and you never have, I would tell anyone in the world to do exactly what you said, to go set a camera up September, October, set it there, forget about it, come back in the spring, and gather that data from that camera and use it the following year. That's exactly how I plan to hunt this year. Cool. Yeah, it's neat that you brought that up.
Well, it's funny that you say that too. For people, like you were kind of specifying, you obviously have the ability to have access to more cameras than probably what the general consumer is. But one thing that I noticed this year is obviously I bought a camera last year and I bought some cameras this year. And historically, how my cameras went is I have a camera, that camera breaks, that camera goes in the garbage, then I get a new camera. Now that I have a camera that lasts, my Lift 1 is now going on its second year. I'm acquiring cameras. And so it's less of a disposable item for me. And I just, like, I was thinking in my head, I was like, wow, I have multiple cameras now this year. I've never had that ever before. I have some options as to what I can do with these and where I can place them and how that I can move them around. And then I was thinking, I was like, well, this is awesome because I don't think that this thing's going to fail me this year or next year. And I'm going to buy one or two more cameras next year. I'm going to actually have the ability to acquire a lot of cameras. I've actually started to number them. And I'll just say, like, right up front too, I was always like kind of off put by like the bigger hunting programs and guys in the industry that are pulling up in an electric buggy and dropping the tailgate and they have 50 cameras there, and it's like, come on, to the general consumer that's really not all that realistic.
Right.
You're only talking to a very small group of people that would be willing to make that type of, or have the financial ability to have, that amount of cameras. But if you buy a better camera, and it lasts you a couple of years, maybe next year you can buy another one, and maybe the next year you can buy another one, and before you know it, you do have, you don't have to have a dozen cameras, but boy, it's nice to have 3 or 4.
Absolutely.
So I've kind of started doing that too. Historical data, right? It's harmful, and I suppose that'll parlay us into one of the things that I want to talk to you about is cellular cameras. That's why they're so popular, is because you don't necessarily have to go in there and infiltrate that area. And I suppose that's where a lot of people step on their toes, right? They put their cameras in what they think is going to be some of the best spots or potentially where they're going to hunt, and then they're going in and damaging that area by putting scent down and disrupting that and letting any deer that's older than 2.5 know that there is someone in this area and this area is not safe. And at the least, you're going to probably influence, deer movement to nightly patterns in that area, if not make them relocate altogether. So it's like a give and take, right? If you're going to put them in some prime spots, bedding areas and areas that you think are holding bigger deer, you almost have to do a year-round approach versus just running them on the fringes if you essentially want to check them all the time and have like up-to-date data. Or there's cellular options now, right?
Yep. Yeah, I would agree with just about all of that. I think that's where a lot of guys make mistakes, is they check their cameras too often. And to mature deer, pressure is pressure. There's no ability for them to reason in the way that they think. So they don't know if you're hunting, sitting in a stand, if you're going on a hike, or if you're in there checking trail cameras, they don't have the ability to reason and know why that you're in there. They just know that you're in there, and it's a foreign smell, and it's pressure to them. So, checking your cameras too often is a big mistake a lot of people make, and something that it's weird because not a lot of industry people really talk about that. You see all these pictures on Instagram and Facebook of these trail camera photos of these giant deer, but those same guys posting those pictures aren't always holding those antlers or have their hands wrapped around their antlers at some point during the season. So you're absolutely right as far as running your cameras on the edges and fringes in these areas, maybe food plots or the edges of transition areas or transition zones. Scrapes are always a good place during, late October, early November. But if you really want to get in and see how really get into deep into a buck's kind of core area into bedding, there's really just a few options there. One of them is hanging a camera earlier in the year and forgetting about it until postseason, or like you said, the ability to use cellular trail cameras is also an option. And truthfully, that's where the industry is going. Everybody seems like they have at least one cellular camera. Guys are trying to acquire more and more and more of them. And really, they're becoming more efficient with new technology as far as the modules that the carriers are now using, and even with the carrier networks as far as going from 3G to 4G and DOS and small cell fiber and whatnot. So that is definitely the way of the future. Would be in the wireless world.
And so I know you get asked it probably daily, right? I mean, if somebody doesn't personally ask you, you're at least answering or responding probably to an email every day, right? About,
yes.
Do you guys intend on building a cellular camera? If so, when will it be available? Is that something that's on your guys' mind?
Yes, we get asked that question. Oh my gosh. We stopped counting that the 2nd of January. Yes, we are actually working on a wireless project right now. We are somewhere around 50 to 60% completion rate on that, actually. So it's something we've actually been working on for a while. We've kind of bounced around on 2 different projects in the wireless world or the cellular world. So it's something that we've been working on for a while, and it's finally starting to come to fruition. That should be available. We're hoping if everything stays on track and stays its course the way it has, that will be to market early next summer, late spring, early next summer of next year.
Oh, awesome. I paid zero attention really to cellular cameras. I don't find that I have as much of an interest in them as most people that I talk to. But what is like what's the additional cost of a cellular versus a regular camera? Obviously, there's other components in there that go into it. I mean, I know that you have a monthly carrier bill, but I'm assuming that the camera itself is more expensive, right?
Yes, yeah, you're absolutely right. So the additional cost of a cellular camera is basically, it boils down to potentially 3 things. Obviously, there's some type of antenna, either internal or external. So an internal antenna can be mounted, surface mounted right on the PCB board. And then obviously the external antenna is typically what you see in most cameras because they have more gain and have better signal. So that's one additional cost. The second is probably the most important, is the cellular module itself, is what's actually giving the device cellular capabilities, which is the most significant cost increase of the entire unit. And then depending on which module that you're using, you also have to have the ability to use a processor to, be the brains of that camera. So, and truthfully, what you see in the trail camera world isn't even a touch of the technology that is readily available in other industries. So a lot of these modules that companies are using, they're nothing compared to what's the power of your cell phone or other cellular or Wi-Fi capable devices. Even though that module might be up to date as far as the most current network, some of these modules have amazing, believable capabilities. So the hunting industry and the trail camera market in general is only really scratching the surface of the available technology there. And some of that is, the consumers, the marketplace has to be ready and willing to accept the products that are coming out too. So just because the technology is there and the ability for a company to make a product, truthfully may not make sense to really spend the money in development and manufacturing and launching a product, if the consumers aren't willing to accept it. So typically what you see in the hunting outdoor industry, when you compare it to other industries, specifically technology industries, kind of in the United States or North America, the hunting industry is really 3 or 4 years behind. They're kind of 3 or 4 years behind that bell curve of what's going on everywhere else. So you can almost kind of watch some of these other industries and marketplaces, and you can almost set your watch 3 years later. The hunting industry will be there 3 years later. So it's kind of neat to see that.
Yeah, the pace of technology right now is like just insane, right? It's one day later, it's like something's out of date. It's been blowing my mind, and I sometimes have to force myself to accept technology. Sometimes I get irritated because I feel like something's good, and I feel like it gets changed just because, not necessarily because it needs to be changed, just because competition with other competitors, like this company now is putting out a new product, and so we have to up our game, and it's as simple as cell phones. I've had the same cell phone for a couple of years, and it works great, and now I'm kind of getting to a spot where I need a new one. And I know it's a simple thing. I think you use an Android phone, don't you?
Yes, I do.
Yeah, so I use an Apple phone. And, historically it's always had your charger import and your 3.5 millimeter plug for audio output, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they eliminated that now on the new phones.
Yes.
Which I feel is just like, it's so silly because very often, being a service tech, I'll run my battery dead. So when I'm on the road, I like to have my phone plugged in and have it charging, and I might also have headphones in or have it plugged into my stereo or whatnot. And now, that has to be done through Bluetooth, which not every vehicle that I drive has that, and I don't have a Bluetooth headset. And there's definitely times to me where the pace of technology is very irritating, and I often wonder, like, what's the end to it? And I could just imagine, as somebody, a business owner in the tech industry, if it's like gets frustrating to you too, because even like the podcast stuff, the software that I use, it's just like every week update, and I'm like, 6 months ago stuff was working fine. Like, you guys don't have to update it every week on me. It's okay, but if you don't, then you have issues, and it's one of those things. You're either going to fight it, and I've seen people do that. I mean, there's people that are just saying, like, hey man, I'm a flip phone kind of guy. I don't have a computer. I can't live completely in that world. So the other thing is to just accept it and embrace it. But I was just wondering on your guys' end, being in the tech business, if it, could potentially get frustrating, or if you see some of those same patterns.
No, yeah, absolutely. It can definitely be frustrating. Just the amount of time that goes into a product, as far as the R&D, and then beta testing, and then manufacturing. It's just on the wireless end, something that we have been through in the last 9 months. From the times that we had started talking with Verizon up until 2 months ago. So you're talking 6 months. The pre-certified modules. There's new ones coming out every month. There's another module that has a different capability. Maybe the cost is a little bit different, or maybe the battery life or power consumption is a little bit better. So it's never ending. But as a business owner, as a manufacturer, when it comes time to pull the trigger on something of that nature, you just have to be sure that you're confident in your research and the decisions that you're going to make. And then you just kind of have to let it go, because it could be a vicious, never-ending cycle. If you keep jumping back and forth from one technology to the next, and then 4 weeks later, and something else is going to come out. So it gets to the point where it can absolutely be frustrating if you let it be, but also at the same time, knowing that things are constantly evolving and never always changing, I guess. You just kind of have to accept it for what it is and embrace it.
Yeah, you're right. There's a sign in my office when you walk in the door of the company that I work for, and it says, the first thing you see when you walk into my office, there's a big sign on the wall. It says, "Evolve or die."
Right. Yeah.
I see that every day. Well, not every day, but when I do walk into my office, that's the first thing I see. And it's always a reminder. It's like, yeah, you're either growing or you're dying.
Yep, absolutely.
But I didn't even think about the fact for you guys about, like when you're doing R&D and planning for production, I mean, you almost have to do some pretty heavy foreshadowing about like when this is an initial thought versus when this is actually something that could reach consumers, what could have happened in that amount of time, right?
Yeah, oh, absolutely. And obviously there's some advantages to being in the industry and having a network of people to rely on, where you have information where that might not be readily available to consumers. So there's, advanced product releases or information that you can gather from some of these component manufacturers. So I guess you do have some insight of what is coming or what is to be. But again, you might be waiting on it on something to kind of come to light, 4 weeks from now, and ultimately there could be an issue with something, and it may not be what it was supposed to be. So it can be a difficult spot. You almost can't rely on counting on something to kind of come to fruition as far as early or I'm trying to think of the right word here. Having inside information, but at the same time, you have to have some trust in manufacturers and companies that you've worked with in the past, and have some type of relationship there where you can kind of, take their word for and count on it being true for what is to come.
Right. Yeah. I'm going down my bullet points here, things that I want to ask you. I know we kind of hit the hour mark. I don't want to keep you up too late. I got a early morning meeting, and I'm sure you got a busy day ahead of you tomorrow, but there's a couple other key things I want to hit on while I got you on the phone here, and one of them is lithium batteries. Because I know that I had talked to you and said that I had a couple, bad runs with lithiums, and then lo and behold, my brother came over here on Friday, and he said, I went out to my camera, it's been out there for 3 weeks, and the batteries were dead. And he, he's an electrician by trade, so he tested those batteries before he put them in, and same thing happened to him. Now he didn't go and, individually test the cells and see if one had failed or if multiple ones had failed, but I know that listening to Matt talk and you guys both really believe that lithium batteries are the better option over alkaline, but I've had multiple negative experiences now, and I'm just wondering if that's something that I can resolve by getting my batteries from somewhere different. I mean, we've bought these from multiple spots now, and I'm like really, really losing confidence in lithium batteries.
Yeah. Well, we do believe lithiums are the better option over alkalines because for a few reasons. One is because of their cold weather performance. They use a metallic based electrode versus alkalines that use a water based electrode, so you get much better cold weather performance out of a lithium battery than the alkaline battery, and then also their discharge rate. So alkalines are a 1.5 volt battery. Lithiums are they run a little bit hotter. They're about 1.7 volts, I believe, depending on what manufacturer that you're getting these from. But they discharge at a constant voltage. There's no voltage drop almost until the moment that they die. So I always give the example of guys using lithium battery tools, power tools. You
Sure.
could use a DeWalt lithium 18 volt drill, and you could run 1,000 screws into a deck, and all of a sudden in 2 or 3 screws, the battery goes dead. So double A cells kind of run at the same pace. They'll run at a constant 100% discharge, max voltage, and then all of a sudden within 50 to 75, 100 pitchers, they die on you. So, but as far as batteries can cause a lot of problems with trail cameras. It's something that most people probably overlook. But as far as running alkalines, there's times where, depending on how the circuitry is built on that PCB board, when you experience voltage drop, when there's below adequate power voltage to run your camera, you will see performance issues such as your nighttime flash shrinking or completely going away, your trigger speed slowing down, your detection GR becoming closer and closer and closer, so your detection distance is actually decreasing. And it's, a lot of times guys probably don't notice that. Other times, guys do notice it. So I would think that, a majority of those times, guys are probably blaming the camera, when they experience some of those problems, which in reality, it could be their batteries. Not all the time, but there are cases such as that. But as far as having problems with lithiums, I think you and I talked about that maybe a month or so ago. We run Energizer lithiums. That's the brand that we kind of tell folks to run, and I believe that's the brand you guys have been running.
Yeah, it is. I don't know what other options there. We were just talking about that too. I know my brother had said that their Amazon offers a lithium battery, but that it had some real bad reviews. And then I know, just going around to, whatever, Home Depot, Meijer, Walmart, places like that, it seems that I don't think Duracell makes a lithium battery. I really only see the Energizer ones.
Yeah, Duracell does not make a lithium battery. Rayovac does not make a lithium, at least in a double A cell. There are some other options out there. I do not have any personal experience with them, so it's hard for me to really say, yeah, hey, go use Amazon Basics or whatnot, because I just, for me to go tell someone to do that without myself having confidence in it, I just can't do that.
Yeah.
But going back to some of the things you guys have experienced, it's a tough scenario. Some of those brands, and including the brand that you run, they do warranty those batteries. Now, whether or not it's worth contacting their customer service and explaining to them your problems or the issues that you had, whether or not they'll take care of it, I can't answer that. But I would say that, and this is coming from our experience after talking with you and Drew, 95% of the guys that we deal with not as technical as you. There aren't a whole lot of guys pulling multimeters out and testing the voltage on their batteries in the manner that you guys are. So definitely give you guys props for that, and actually truthfully understanding in how those things, how the batteries and the cameras actually work. Most of the guys that are buying these things just throw whatever batteries they have laying around. Some guys mix brands, mix types,
Right.
throw a card in there and expect the thing to run, and that's just not the case. But as far as giving advice, just because you're buying batteries from your local retailer or offline, that doesn't always mean that there's but there's not going to be an issue with those batteries.
Right.
I know it's a pain in the butt to go and test every battery. I certainly do not do that. But if you're if you're really worried and you've had bad experiences with it, it's not a bad idea to do. And you don't always have to get a multimeter. There's several companies out there that have little handheld testers where you just throw a battery in and it'll voltage,
Right.
read the voltage for you. But that's you guys are that's a tough spot to have multiple bad experiences with that brand of batteries. So
Well, we'll see what happens here in the next couple months, because I have a couple cameras that I put way out in some spots up north that I don't intend on seeing for quite a while. And what I did is I loaded the battery tray up, and then I just tested across the contacts to see what my voltage was. And it showed what I think you're ideally looking for, an additional, or when it's all added up, over 12 volts, right?
yeah, it's a 12-volt camera with those lithium batteries. I think it reads somewhere between 12.6, 12.87, somewhere in there
Right.
what the full charge should be.
Right, which is what we verified on. And I don't believe that my brother did that probably on that set of batteries. It's just like, and it could be that stuff happens. I mean, I know in contracting, I've had people, spend money on the most expensive, nicest tankless water heater, and you get the thing put in, and you go to fire it up, and it throws an error code, and you have to order a part, and it won't be here for a week, and it's just like, oh my God, that stuff happens, and
Right.
fluky stuff happens. But it was just like, man, after a couple times, I was losing confidence in those. But I know exactly what you're talking about, with the alkaline batteries, obviously. And in northern Michigan, we can see, a couple winters ago, we saw, without wind chill, we saw 40 below, I think.
Wow, that's
Or
insane.
with wind chill, 40 below.
That's
But
crazy.
it, those things get put through the ringer, and I have a couple that I want to leave up. I don't think that I'll leave them up. I'll probably leave them up until like Christmas time, just because it does get so cold and it's so brutal up
Yeah.
there. I just don't really feel that it's at my advantage to expose them to that kind of terrible, terrible elements. But they'll be in some cold temperatures, and I just want to have my have all my premises covered, that I know when I do go to get that card that it's going to be there. Because to be honest with you, man, I have these cameras in a couple spots that I am like losing sleep over. I'm so excited about going and pulling the cards here. So
Nice. Is that's up in the UP in like Cedar Swamps, or is that what you guys are hunting up there?
no, I actually have not ever to this point done any hunting in the UP for a couple of reasons. One, it's obviously a farther drive. Two, I just never had anybody that I was involved with that deer hunted in the UP. But that's
Hmm.
changing. Now I do have some friends that hunt in the UP, and there's like a pretty big draw for me to go up there, because I love hunting big woods. And I mean, there's just endless amounts of public land up in the UP. But between real harsh winters and wolves and bears, the
Right.
deer numbers, and it varies from area to area, but
Yeah.
um, you might not be doing yourself any huge favors by traveling up to the UP if your target is to go up there and shoot a deer. Now for the experience, it'll be awesome, and I'm kind of that's my look at it, is I'm kind of getting more into like the backcountry experience, getting out onto bigger tracts of land, looking at digital maps, potentially identify where there could be deer, and just going there and checking it all out. But these cameras right now they are up in northern Michigan, but in a state state land forest that's 105,000 acres, and yeah, some real nasty deep cedar swamps that a couple of the spots you can go to. I mean, without digital maps, I don't know how people did it, and they did it.
I know.
And they did it for a long time, man. But I honestly, well, it goes back to you talking about woodsmanship. I don't know how they did it, because, man, without a good compass and a digital map going into some of those places, I really wouldn't be comfortable, man. It's you get in there and you get in even like a quarter mile, and you feel like you are stepping foot on ground that no human has ever seen in the existence of this world. It's just that remote and that dense, and it can even get stressful. I've been in some spots this spring when I was scouting where, for no reason, just a natural human reaction, I think, to being in that dense of an area for so long, where like my body actually overcame like this stressful event where my brain recognized, like, why don't you get out of here? Like,
Yeah.
nothing good's gonna happen here. Like, just get out of here, and almost like a state of panic. Some of the stuff is so thick and nasty, but every now and then, and now with digital maps, I'm starting to figure out how to identify these spots. All you have to do is find a small spot of elevation, and all it has to do is be 5 or 10 feet, where out in the middle of that swamp, there's a little bit of dry ground, and there might be a couple patches of more mature trees, and you'll find bedding. And my thought process is that's where nobody else is going, so that's where I'm going to try to go. And I found some stuff this year that looks pretty promising, so that's where I have a couple cameras set up right now, and I'm really looking forward to. I probably won't go back in there until I go in there to hunt, and then I'll hunt for the day, and then I'll pull the card, and be interested to see what's going on back in there.
That's so cool, man. That's I couldn't agree more as far as hunting. There's something about as a hunter, being in wild places, at least for me, and it sounds like you're kind of in the same boat. I grew up in all these small woodlots and the family farm where you could hear the dog bark, and there was tractors running, and you could see the barn light was on, and you could from the woods. And it took me a trip, a western hunt, to really understand being in those remote wild places where you're exactly right. You're in spots sometimes where you feel like there's never been a human that stepped on that part of the earth ever before you.
Right.
And that's kind of, that trip really changed the way I really thought about whitetail hunting, as far as, getting away from hunting those small woodlots and ag ground and venturing to the big woods. There's just something about being in those wild places that, I don't know, man, it kind of feeds my soul.
Yeah. Yeah, it's getting away from the busyness of life, and just kind of like almost going back in time to a little bit of a simpler thing. And there's definitely something to be said for go be cold and miserable for a couple days, because it'll make your warm house and bed, it'll make you appreciate it.
Absolutely. Hey, I don't want to jump off topic, but I want to jump back to your points about the your experience with those batteries. One other thing that kind of popped in my head as we've been talking here the last couple of minutes is, making sure that you're buying batteries and cards, SD cards, from reputable places. the topic of the batteries brought me onto another thought of SD cards. And a few years ago, there were a batch of, as you could say, counterfeit SanDisk SDHC cards.
Oh, really?
And yes, so and there were a lot of issues with that as far as the FAT files being correct on those cards, and devices properly writing to those cards. So that's just one quick tip if anybody takes anything away from this podcast is don't buy that stuff at a flea market because you find it on sale for $4, because more than likely it's probably some counterfeit company out of China or Taiwan or whatever, where somebody got a hold of those and they're selling them for $2 at the flea market. It's not going to be any good, even though you think you think you're getting a deal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no doubt. And I think it's a good thing to mention too is that on those SD cards, if you're using the video function, I'm not sure if it affects the photo function, but I found out that you have to run, there's different classes of SD cards, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
So
there's at your lower writing speeds, there's a class 4 card, there's a class 6 card, there's a class 10, and then there's beyond that, there are some different classifications beyond that. I can't tell you exactly what they are off the top of my head, but going back to the high definition video, there is a difference there as far as how those cards operate and write and actually take information from the device and store that data on the card itself. And there's actually, people call all cards SD cards, but technical term, there's different classifications. An SD card is technically classified as storage up to 2 gigabytes. Anything from 2 gigabytes to 32 gigabytes is an SDHC card, which stands for Secure Digital High Capacity. Beyond 32 gigs, you have the SDXC cards, which is Secure Digital Extra Capacity, or whatever the X stands for. I can't remember off the top of my head, but so there, and SD cards can cause fits in cameras too. Some cameras can only take up to a certain size card because of those file allocation tables being on those cards. So there's a whole other ball of worms to get into there when you start talking about SD cards.
So I guess to simplify it, what do you recommend? What do you guys recommend that you are running in your camera?
In our debut camera, the Lift 1, you can run any major SD card brand. So SanDisk, PNY, Transcend, Sony, any of those major brands are fine. Patriot is even okay, but it only accepts up to a 32 gigabyte card. So it takes anything that's an SDHC card, and they're backwards compatible. So even if you have a regular SD card that's 1 gigabyte, that first camera will write to that card fine. There's no issues there. But then when you jump up to our newest camera, the Lift Mark II, it can take up to a 64 gig card. So it's actually running on an SDXC card. So again, any major brand's fine. If you are going to run the video function on the new camera, I would recommend a class 10. Beyond that, the biggest thing with SD cards is understanding that every camera manufacturer and even models sometimes will have different codecs. So they'll have a different writing process to how that camera is actually taking a picture and storing that information to a card. And we recommend that you format your cards in any device that you're running, no matter, it doesn't matter what brand camera that you're running. If you have the ability to format your card in the camera, we recommend that for our camera especially. And then, if you're running Moultrie or, any of those Wild Game or Stealth Cam or any brand, we recommend formatting those cards in those cameras, because what that allows the camera to do is, well, one, it allows the camera and the card to sync so that your writing speed is operating off the host device, which would be your camera. And then it also allows to ensure that those file allocation tables are in the proper structure to store that data. So if you ever run into an issue where you have corrupt photos or corrupt files, or sometimes you have I don't know, your pictures come up scrambled, more than likely it's because the data is written to the card in the incorrect order. So when that card has to kind of put that data back together, for you to view that picture, it's not able to do that. And also, because everyone uses a different codec, or firmware on their cameras, there are times where we've experienced where someone will run a card in a different brand of camera, and then they will stick that card into our camera, and then there'll actually be some potential issues there. And that's happened with other companies as well. I know when as a consumer, when I was running multiple brands, if I took a card out of a specific brand and tried to use it into a different brand, it would cause that camera to throw fits. So it's always best to have, typically we tell guys, if you can buy 2 cards for every camera and then label them, that's really a good practice to get into.
I was just gonna say that. That's exactly what I do now. I have my cameras labeled, 1, 2, and 3, 1, 2, 3, and 4, and then I have my cards labeled for those cameras, and I on rare occasion, if something weird happens, I might flip-flop one, but it's never intentionally, and I try to just keep those 2 cards for, each camera, and I haven't had any issues, so.
Good.
But it's nice that your guys' camera is so user-friendly with the, the screen on there, and it's just, it's real simple, up, down, back, left, right. You don't have to, be a software coding guy to run the camera. You just turn the thing on and go into the functions, and you scroll through and select and back out. It's just really user friendly. That was definitely something that I noticed right away versus other cameras that I had dealt with in the past, is how user friendly it was. And yeah, I don't think I had ever done that ever before, format a card, but it says right in the instructions. And when I did buy your camera, that's the first thing I did. I read through the instructions, and it told me how to do that, and it's simple to do. And obviously every time I do that, I pull a card out, I go in there and I format the card and turn the camera on and close the thing. And when I walk away from that, I'm confident that it's going to do what it's supposed to. And up to this point, it hasn't done anything but that.
Good, cool, that's awesome. That's
so.
It's good to know that somebody actually has read that manual, because we oh man, there's days where it's like, why do we even spend money printing those things? Some of the calls and inquiries that we get are kind of funny.
No, I totally get it. It's just the pace of life, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's like that's like one of the rare things that I've read in the last couple of years. So.
I can't even begin to describe how guilty I am of buying a product, or my wife buying something that needs to be assembled, and I just cut the box open and go to town. Instructions or directions, user manuals, those go in the garbage, and then I'm kicking myself in the butt later for it.
Yep, I can attest to doing the same thing. So, one thing before I let you go, I wanted to kind of see what I know that you do a lot of hunting on public land. I mean, you talked about the farm that you have, but I'm correct that you and Matt do quite a bit of land hunting on public land, and well, you tell me, do you guys carry stands in on your back? Do you have stands pre-hung on public land? And how do cameras, play into it? I think it's something that more and more guys are realizing right now, that they have the ability to do. traveled to different states to hunt and go and see different property, and there's been a lot of influential people that at a high level have been successful year in year out on taking like trophy class deer on public land, so it's become more popular. What is your guys' approach to hunting public land, using cameras, your tree stand gear, the whole thing?
Yeah, as far as stand locations, we do pre-hang some stands. In fact, I was just down on a piece of public last week or the week before, and I hung 4 stands. And those stands, some of them will not even get sat in, to be totally honest, but they're hung based off topography and historical trail camera data. So there's spots that we know that are cruising spots, or they're spots based off topography, whether that's a saddle or a bench or some kind of structure like a clear cut, or just an edge of different types of timber growth maybe. So typically when we go in there and hang stands like that are pre-hung, I will hang a stand, get it set, and then only leave 1 stick or maybe 2 sticks on the tree, and I'll take the bottom 2 off just to kind of reassure myself that no one's going to be in there, stealing sticks and stands and my get up. But we, at the same time, we are absolutely mobile. I have a mobile setup where I can use 3 sticks that are slightly modified, and about 11-pound cast aluminum stand, to where I can get about 20 feet up in the air. That whole set is probably right around 18, 19 pounds. So not super, super light, but not really all that heavy. And a lot of those places, we're walking in, on average, I would say 3/4 of a mile would probably be an average walk. There are spots where we're walking 1.5 miles. I with this cold front coming in next week, will actually be my first time having any stand time in, and there's a spot that I looked at last night on Google Earth that was 9/10 of a mile. So I will walk in, hang and hunt that day, 100% completely mobile. On top of stands, we actually also use saddles. So that's kind of, I don't know if it was a fad that came about several years ago, but it's certainly something that you don't see as much today as you did in years past. But basically, it's are you familiar with tree saddles at all, or an arrow hunter, or anything of that nature?
I've had John Eberhart on the podcast, and I've followed John Eberhart for years, and he'll be very blunt in telling you that his success would not occur if it wasn't for a tree saddle, that he could not have the level of success consistently that he has, is that crucial to him to hunt out of a tree saddle.
Yeah. I'm not sure, it's a piece of equipment that I wouldn't use every single day. For me, it definitely has its place in my repertoire. For an all-day sit, I'm not sure I would pack in, or if I was filming or something of that nature, I'm not sure I would walk in with a saddle. But if you're really going in deep and you really want to try to cut your weight down, that's definitely a very, very viable option. Not only that, but it allows you to get in different trees and different positions that you may not be able to get in with a traditional hang-on stand or even a climber. And you have the ability to kind of maneuver around the tree and basically, shoot 360 degrees, which, you can't quite get out of a stand. So I'll say that they take a little bit of getting used to. It's definitely different shooting out of a saddle than it is a stand. And not only that, but the comfort level and I guess the mental confidence of being safe out of one is probably a little bit different. You're basically tied to a tree.
You're just kind of hanging there, right?
Yeah. And you do some different things with your feet as far as setting up, some type of platform or screw-in pegs or strap-on pegs or something to kind of walk yourself around the tree. But it is very, very different compared to hunting out of a a traditional hang-on or even a climber.
Right.
So, but yeah, that's kind of how we approach stands on public land. There are times where we'll go in and check cameras with stands on our back, and we'll have a series of cameras, maybe 5 or 6 cameras. We'll check on the way in, and if we see something that tells us to hunt, we'll throw a stand up right then and there and hunt. Matt, last year, Matt had the opportunity to, on a deer that he had hunted last year, I guess it was the second year he was hunting that deer, about 160-inch mainframe 10, just a giant old big woods buck, that we walked in with stands on our back, pulled a card. He was on a scrape the night before, which was 364 days, after we had on camera last year. It was an overhead moon day, and looking at that setup, you would look at it and say, not in a million years would you ever have an opportunity at a deer like that in that scenario. We were in separate trees. I was filming him in separate trees about 10 yards apart. We were 10 feet off the ground because the trees that we were in were probably, 6 or 7 inches in diameter. I mean, just very, very small trees, not much cover. But it was the right place. That's where we had to be. And ultimately he had that deer. Well, we both had that deer walk past us at about 5 steps from the base of our tree. So, being mobile presents you opportunities such as that. So that's definitely a big thing in what we do. But as far as running cameras on public, obviously we run a lot of cameras. We have, at any given time between, company-wide, we probably have 75 to 85 cameras in the woods, which is not, it's not
it's pretty crazy.
We have to mark them on our Onyx mobile application or Google Earth, because you forget about them after a while. So we definitely understand that, most people don't run that volume of cameras, but, really we hang cameras based off topography, saddles, benches, pinch points around, steep drainages or draws, and then on habitat edges. So, clear cuts, different type of hardwood stands versus, if you get an edge of hardwoods versus conifers, or different types of successional growth. That's basically how we run our cameras. And then of course, come late October, early November, we usually pour cameras on scrapes. That's definitely a big tactic that we use on public. And we don't really worry about people stealing cameras. That's not a big thing where we are, because we get in pretty deep for the most part. Mm-hmm. But if we are, if that does come to mind, if we are worried about someone walking off with a camera, a lot of times, because we have sticks on our back, we're carrying stands and stuff in, we'll hang a camera, we'll get it elevated. We'll get it 10 feet off the ground or 11 feet off the ground and angle it down to, where we think that spot of interest may be. And, we have had some cameras stolen, but I can't say that any of them have been from an elevated set. Typically when guys are walking around the woods, their eyes are, to the ground, or, 4 or 5 feet above the ground, looking for rubs or whatnot. Typically they're not around, looking up at the trees, unless they're looking for a spot to hang a stand, or they're squirrel hunting. So yeah, that's definitely something that we do. And the other thing, if there is a spot where we think that has easy access, if it's off of an old logging road or a hiking trail or bike trail or bridle trail or something, a lot of times we'll go in a quarter mile, and we'll hang camera, up in the air like that. We'll hang it up, 8, 9, 10 feet off the ground, and we'll use it to monitor foot traffic to see actually how many guys, are making their way, that far into the woods. And, a lot of times what we find, there are guys that go in, but there aren't, man, I there's probably only a handful of guys we've gotten on public land that have walked over, a half a mile. And that's fun. Some of those cameras are on ridge tops and bridle trails where it's very easy walking. And they're still not going very far in. So,
Sure.
It may be different for you guys up, in Michigan and some of those swamps, I imagine.
No, it's not really. If anything, it's less distance because particularly the area that I hunt, for the most part, is like it's very hard to traverse. A lot of guys will stick to. There's a lot of logging roads, and then there's also a lot of gas pipelines up there.
Mm-hmm.
So people don't venture too far off of those because once you do get off of those, it's tough. It's tough traversing those areas. I mean,
Right.
I fashion myself to be in relatively good shape. I work out yearly primarily to stay in shape to be able to deer hunt the way that I want to deer hunt, not only now, but I want to be able to do this when I'm in my 50s. And I know that if I'm not taking care of my body, it's just not happening, man. There's no
Right.
way. One, it's hard to get out there. Two, if it's hard to get out there, imagine bringing a deer back.
Oh, yeah.
So there's just a lot of guys that, I've even spoke with guys that, they will go out there and they'll say, oh, yeah, I did see a buck or, I could have shot a deer, but I don't want to bring it out of there,
Right.
And
Yeah.
I totally get it. That spot that I was telling you, one of the spots where I have a camera right now is, I'm so excited to go back in there to hunt. I essentially got a tip through social media from a guy that runs like a trout stream. I'm trying to think exactly what it is, but up in the state forest that I hunt, there's a lot of trout rivers.
Okay.
And so he's involved with trout habitat and trout streams, and he knows this whole state forest like very well. He grew up there. He lives there to this day. He told me he spends 3 to 7 days a week in this state forest. And he doesn't really focus his deer hunting efforts up there anymore. He travels down to southern Michigan and does his deer hunting, but he actually sent me GPS coordinates to a spot, and he said, I think you should go out here and check this out because I came across this years and years ago, and there's not very many guys that would be willing to put in the work to go out there. And after listening to your podcast, I think it's something that you might be interested in. So here you go. And I had kind of known that this area existed. Like I was telling you, I've tried to identify these essentially these little spots of higher elevation that are out in like real big swamps.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't know this one existed. And it's over a mile through some of the nastiest stuff. I mean, you go through thick, nasty cedar swamp, and then you come to a spot where it's just like there was probably a fire. I don't know if it was like 10 or 15 or 20 years ago, but it burned. And so now it's all low successional, like tag alder growth.
Yeah.
It's almost impenetrable. You have to crawl, duck, go over, cut this. It's depressing when you get to that spot and you know that for like the next 100 yards, that's what you got to go through. And then it's another half mile or so of just this super nasty swamp. But then you come out to this, essentially it's an island. And, we hiked a tree stand in there a couple weeks ago, actually, when we had that real hot spell here back, I don't know if it was like 3 weeks ago where we got hit with like some 90s.
Yeah.
And I actually suffered heat exhaustion going out there to do this and coming back. I mean, we thought we were prepared with food and water, but we actually ran low on water. And It sucked, man. It totally sucked. But when we got out there, it was so worth it because just they're one of the things that we compete with up in that state forest is that there's a lot of elk,
Okay.
and so sometimes it's hard to identify what is elk travel and what's deer travel. You might find a real heavy run trail, and you think, oh wow, this is getting a lot of traffic, but it might just be elk traffic. The deer might not occupy that trail at all. And the one thing I like about the swamps is that the elk don't go back in there. One, they're just physically not capable.
Mm-hmm.
Um, they like to stay more towards the open stuff. And so it's nice the spot doesn't have any elk back there, and there's, years worth of rubs that are, up to your face. Like they're mature deer that are hanging out back there on this island, and my thought process is like the day after gun opener, it's going to be the spot to be, because
Dude, that
I think a lot of mature deer, one, there might be deer that live there year round, and then two, when gun season opens and the Orange Army infiltrates the woods, that any mature deer is going to know about that location and potentially relocate there. So I'll be
dude,
sitting there. I got a camera hung there on a scrape right now. It's one of the most beat down deer runs that I've ever seen in any section of woods in Michigan, and I'm stoked to get back out there and to hunt it and pull that camera.
man, dude, that sounds incredible, man. That you got me fired up just kind of visualizing what you were going through just to get to the spot, and then you kind of setting the tone or the presence of, I can just imagine. I mean, obviously everyone knows about the hunters per square mile, the numbers in Michigan, and the amount of pressure that your state sees. And I can just kind of envision, all those mature bucks kind of dumping into an area of cover like that after a week of gun season. Man, it just sounds awesome.
Yeah, I'm excited to share like the whole thing with the podcast audience and all my friends that I deer hunt with and everybody that follows the show, and it's gonna be it's gonna be very different than anything that I've ever done. It's essentially a 2 hour hike in the morning. In the dark. I figure from when we actually pull out of our camp, there will be a 10-minute truck ride involved, then to get out of the truck and get dressed, then to actually get into the island, and then to move from you come in on the south end of the island, and what we'll primarily be doing is probably trying to hunt this on a north wind and get to the, I guess it would be the northwest end of the island. So then you have to move across the island in a manner that if there is deer in there, you're not raising hell and blowing everything out of there, and then actually get up in the stand. So we figure it's going to take 2 hours to get out there in the morning, but I think it'll be well worth it. And we actually named the tree stand the Butcher, because there's no way that you could bring a deer out of there. I mean, I suppose it could be done. I've talked to some guys that hunt some huge swamps in Michigan, and they say it's like, basically against their family morals to bring a deer back in if it's not in one piece and it can't be hung in a buck pole. But I don't know how it physically could be done. So I'm taking a large leader pack in with me, and processing equipment, and I
Right.
figure the only way myself will be capable is to quarter the thing out and put it in a backpack and bring it out of there, because I don't know how else you'd do it.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of those spots that we're going into are the same way. There's it's not quite the size of the woods that you're hunting. It's not
You guys deal
105,000
with
acres.
elevation though, right?
Oh my gosh, it is insane. And it's not, the elevation changes 500-600 feet, but it's not it's not like you're at a very high elevation, and it's not what people think about when they think of Ohio. They think of, agricultural grounds, hardwood lots. We're in hill country, very, very, very steep, very, very short ridges. It almost makes you feel like you're in the Badlands in South Dakota, with mature woods. I mean, you're up, down, up, down, up, down. Access is, it's completely miserable. Like when you're talking about going a mile in, taking 2 hours, it's the same exact manner when we access some of our stands. It's just we're not walking through swamps and
Right.
it's
You're
just
going
different.
up.
Yes, we're going up and down, up and down. Very, very thick and nasty successional growth in some spots. It's a challenge. I mean, I've been in the same boat as you, where you're thinking you're in some spots where it's like, okay, it's not going to do me any good to have a deer cart or a sled or some type of dragging device, because it would take you, 6, 7, 8 hours to get a deer out, and there's no other option but to, quarter the thing up and use a pack and make a couple trips. So,
Right.
but at the same time, like, to me, like, how rewarding is that as a whitetail hunter to not only put your body through that, but to put your mind through the same type of I don't know, I want to call it agony, but man, when it finally comes together and you have an opportunity at a mature deer and everything works and you put your hands on that animal, man, there's something to be said about a person to go through that and that experience and come out successful.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And you know, you hear a lot of guys. It's a pretty common thing, especially here in the state of Michigan. Well, the deer hunting here sucks, and there's no big deer. And to me, I'll agree with that to a point. It's definitely not as easy as if you were to go out to Kansas or Iowa. But one thing I've said before on this show, and I'll reiterate, is that it's all relative. It's as easy as it is for a guy out in Kansas to kill 130 or 40-inch deer. A guy in Michigan, you should be able to, and at least I can, feel the same level of happiness and joy when you kill a 2-year-old 110-inch 8-point, as a guy out west that, or in Kansas, that kills 130 or 150-inch deer every year, because to him it's pretty easy. He's not accomplishing some crazy, insane task. And I just feel like people are kind of selling them short on the idea that shooting giant deer year in, year out is what's going to make them happy. It's more about just embracing the accomplishment, realize that it's harder here, and embrace it. And you have options. If you want to shoot bigger deer, one, you can travel to hunt. Two, you can try to obtain some knowledge and apply it and put into some work that other people aren't willing to do. And if things line up for me this year, I'll be a full testament to that, because the biggest deer I've ever shot is probably 110-inch northern Michigan 3.5-year-old 8-point buck. And I've never shot any kind of monarch mature 4, 5, 6, 7-year-old deer, but my mindset has changed a lot, and I feel that the knowledge is out there and people are doing it. You just got to kind of pay attention to what they're doing, and then really, really pay attention to what you're doing and what you're seeing out in the woods. And I think it's possible, and I don't know, if I can do it, anybody can do it. So,
Yeah.
I mean, I understand not everybody has the physical capabilities to go a mile into a swamp and do that, but a lot more people do than don't. And I think you just gotta put your mind to it, and if you want it that bad, don't complain about how your state handles the deer and this and that. Just accept what you have in front of you and go out there and get after it. And if you do accomplish it, man, the reward is just that much sweeter because you did it in one of the areas where it's like you knew that, you know, you were putting yourself against the odds.
Yeah, man. I mean, I couldn't agree more. If I said it myself, it's, you know, everything that's running through my mind would agree with you. And
yeah,
you know, there's, you know, to your point, you know, some of the Michigan is a tough state, you know, and no one's going to argue that. And some of I know some guys from Michigan. They kind of hunt some of the same areas that we hunt, and those guys are some of the best woodsmen that I know, that I personally know. So, you know, to your point, as with, you know, if their goal is to go out and harvest a mature deer, there are options out there. You know, I don't want to see a flow of Michigan guys coming to Ohio and shooting
you're probably pissed it's already happening, right?
It is, yeah. It's you know, probably 20% of the guys that we run into on that piece of public are from Michigan, but you know, some of those guys are some of the best guys that I know. So
yeah, well, you get kind of double whammy too, right? Because you get a lot of Ohio. I mean, has kind of gotten a reputation now for being a bigger buck state, and I would assume you get traffic from Pennsylvania too, right?
Not so much where we are. You know, the area that Drew and those guys are going into, they see a lot of pressure. The area that we're in doesn't see quite as much, just because the terrain is so rugged and the deer numbers are so low. You know, there's not a lot of guys venture down there, but most of the out of state non-residents that we see are from Michigan and Virginia, believe it or not. That's kind of weird, the guys coming from the East Coast, but there are quite a few guys that we see with Michigan or Virginia plates on their trucks. So
yeah, it's one problem that us Michigan hunters don't have to or deal with and don't know anything about is having people traveling to our state to hunt that we have to compete with.
Well,
it's a hard sell.
I tell you, man, I wouldn't be, as crazy as this sounds, like I wouldn't be opposed to you know, experiencing what you're going through in northern Michigan, you know, hunting some of those wild places and some of those cedar swamps. I can tell you that I do hunt some public around home that is swamp ground, and do I hate it. It's just especially in the early season with the mosquitoes and the hot temperature, and it doesn't seem, no matter where I go or how I plan my entrance or exit routes, I always end up wet. Man, it's just, I have a tough time hunting swamps.
Yeah. It's definitely, it's a shame that that it happened to me, but I actually had a guy on who's a popular figure on the Hunting Beast a couple weeks ago about hunting swamps. He's been extremely successful in hunting cedar swamps, in particularly in Michigan. He's a Michigan resident, and we did a whole hour and a half podcast on hunting swamps, and the audio crashed on me, and I lost the entire thing because it was like a real. It was one of the better podcasts that I've recorded, but we're gonna redo it. It's gonna happen again, but yeah, it's a whole different thing. And I don't want to give the wrong impression that that's the only way that I hunt up there, and I'm crazy, and I'm always diving deep into these big swamps. I hunt a lot of edge, like a lot of, just like you said, a lot of transition where a cedar swamp hits a ridge or an oak flat. A lot of transition, a lot of funnels. I'm starting to look at things a little bit differently as I've been paying more and more attention to and trying to focus my efforts on hunting bedding versus transitional stuff. But like you were just saying, you wouldn't mind coming up here. We could talk about maybe doing something in the future, because it is hard to sell a guy on come to Michigan and do a hunt because you're just it's not very likely that you're gonna come here and shoot 130 or 50-inch deer or a booner, but the experience is I don't know, I haven't traveled around a ton of places to hunt, but I'll tell you it's a special thing for me when I go up there to it's just a real interesting landscape, a lot of biodiversity, and it's cool to be around elk. There's elk up there, black bear. There's no shortage of wildlife whatsoever, and there's just like a backcountry feel to the whole thing. So, and the amount of public land is endless. Just the state forest that I'm in is 105,000 acres. If you drive an hour west, there's another state forest that's 85,000 acres, and if you drive an hour south, there's another one that's 65,000 acres. It's like I couldn't cover that hardly in a lifetime.
Yeah, yeah, that's
And
incredible.
then you can go to the UP, and on top of that, I mean, I think there's one state forest in the UP that's 500,000 acres.
Wow, that's insane.
Just one chunk of state forest that's 500,000 acres, and then there's dozens of them up there. So it's like just endless. The hunting up there, from what I hear, is a little bit tougher. But I know that you're friends with is his name Jeff? Is it Sturgis?
Yes, Jeff Sturgis. Yep.
And he's been pretty consistently successful at killing some big deer in Michigan, and especially I think in the UP, if I remember correctly, that he's done a lot of hunting in the UP and he's killed some big deer, right?
Yeah. You're correct. Jeff he's a whitetail guy, full time by trade. He owns a company called Whitetail Habitat Solutions, where he's actually a whitetail consultant. And he's one of the most intelligent deer guys that I know. None. I would put him in the ranks, and probably the Andre DeQuistos, the Mark Juries, the Dan Infaults of the whitetail world. Jeff's very good at what he does, and he's been consistent. Not only on he does hunt private ground, but he does a lot of stuff that you see on public, and he's really good at what he does. He's hunted public ground in the UP. He's been successful. He's hunted public ground in the Allegheny National Forest in Pennsylvania and been successful. He's hunted public land in Ohio and has been successful. So he's a resident of Wisconsin, but he has spent quite a bit of time in the UP, and I believe I think he was recognized as a deer manager of the year by the QDMA back in the 2000s, maybe like 2001, 2002, for some of the stuff that he was doing in the UP. He has a food plot system and things that he did in the UP in very, very, very poor soil conditions. And seen some amazing results. So, yeah.
He's.
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say he's someone that I will probably want to try to get on the show at some point in time and talk to, because I've heard him before, and I definitely could pick his brain for a while.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, well, man, a 2-hour deer hunting podcast. We covered just about everything that I wanted to hit. I did want to say thanks for you guys, our sponsor, and the digital deer camp event that we're running here through this deer hunting season, and giving away a couple trail cameras. So if anybody wants to have an attempt at winning Exodus trail camera, we're going to be giving away 2 of them. All the details are at lifestylelost.com. We're partnered up with them through the season to run a essentially what started out as a online buck poll, but transitioned into what we're now labeling a digital deer camp, and it's just sharing your hunting season through this platform and tagging your photos of your hunting season and your successful hunts. And we're going to pick some winners at the end of the year. And there's a lot of good prizes. And uh, one of the top prizes in my eyes is new Exodus Lift 2 trail camera. So thanks a lot for being part of that. I know a lot of people are pretty excited about it.
Yeah, man, we're glad to be a part of it. We're humbled we have the opportunity to do that. We definitely recognize the state of Michigan and the hunting heritage being as deep and as strong as anywhere in the country. And we're like I said, we're excited and glad to be a part of that.
Yeah, cool. And anybody that listens that's interested, like I said, all the details, if you go to lifestylelost.com and click on the link for Digital Deer Camp, it's super simple to follow along with, and you can have a chance to win some great prizes. And anybody in the entire country can enter it. It is a whitetail contest, but whether you're out west or in Ohio or Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, anybody's welcomed, interested. It's not just a Michigan event, just so we're clear on that. But.
Oh, cool. I guess, that's my mistake. I thought that was state-specific thing. Well, that's awesome.
No, that's one of the reasons why. That's one of the reasons why we didn't want it to be a buck poll, because we couldn't include guys in Kansas and then in Michigan. You know what I mean? Because it's like
right.
Some guy out in Kansas is going to shoot a 204-inch mega giant. So
right.
there's a couple different categories. There's even I think there's, I don't know if there's archery and firearm, but there's age classifications, and then there's also different groups. Most unique buck, largest scoring buck. I think there's a doe. Whoever shoots the heaviest doe, there's a prize for. So there's some cool and unique stuff going on, I think, on it.
Super cool, man.
So yeah, anything else you want to touch on or bring up before we wrap it up?
No, I think that was a pretty good talk, man. I enjoyed the chat, and I'm glad that we finally caught up, and I was able to join the show.
Yeah, absolutely. Is there anything? I know you mentioned cellular camera. Is there anything else that you want to maybe tip people off to kind of keep their eyes open for in the future? Or are you guys focused on that project and your current trail camera?
Yeah, we have a couple of things that we're working on right now. There'll actually be a couple models released prior to that cellular camera. So we've been working on our 2018 models for quite some time now, and the plan is to get those launched here pretty quick. Those will be probably available. The goal is the holiday season to launch those two additional models before or around the holiday, Black Friday, season. So in the next 60 days or so, I guess. There'll
awesome.
be some new stuff coming out from us, and then that'll be backed up, next spring, early summer, with that cellular release. So, yeah, we've we're still a relatively young and small company, but we're pretty excited about 2018 and in the future of Exodus trail cameras. So there'll be lots in store in the future from us.
Awesome. Yeah, and I just want to say too in closing, like I think it's cool what you guys did. I think in a bigger picture, I'd like to see more companies and business in general follow your guys' lead, because I think you've brought you've put a focus on like personal interaction, where it's just a lot different than a lot of the ways that other companies are doing business now. A lot of times it's just like running people through a ringer, and numbers are numbers, and I just think you guys put more thought in it, and you do a really good job of making me feel like I'm working with a small business. I know I can go to a big box retailer and buy a cheaper camera, but I always really liked doing small business, and it gives me like a good feeling. And not that I'm classifying you guys as a small business, but you give me that feel when I do business with you that I know you guys by name. I feel like I'm walking into a local hardware store and dealing with somebody that I've known for years and I recognize the face versus going into Home Depot trying to track someone down to potentially give me help that leads me in the wrong direction. So, a huge prop to you guys for the way that you handle your operations. And I hope companies are paying attention to what you guys are doing because it certainly makes the customer interaction with the company a lot more pleasurable. And it's just been I'm glad that I found you guys as a company and will continue to, be an Exodus purchaser. And a lot of the reason is just by the way you guys go about your business. So I thank you for doing that, and I really do hope that more companies in the future pay close attention and start to handle their business in that manner.
Yeah, man, we those words strike home. We're humbled to hear that. And at the end of the day, that's hearing those words is truthfully the reason we do a lot of the things that we do. So we all, Matt and I and my brother Steve, we have a saying that our bottom line in Exodus isn't based on dollars and cents. It's based on people. And that's not a cliche saying. We don't say that to obtain customers and acquire business. That's who we are as people, and that's the way we do business. So,
well, it's awesome. I think it's a backbone of what made this great country is those type of small businesses, and I hate to see it go away from that, and I think you guys are a step in the right direction. So,
thanks, man.
That being said, where can people go? What's your web address and your social media spots that if people want to see more of your products that they can go to?
You can visit our website at www.exodusoutdoorgear.com, or you can find us on Facebook and Instagram at Exodus Trail Cameras.
Awesome, and then you'll probably be doing some shows, I imagine, around the Midwest.
Oh my gosh, yes. Yeah. Come. I guess it really kicks off the first week of January at the ATA show, and then we're on the road basically until the end of April. Across the Midwest. So, and then we have a few shows during the summer also. So, from January to the end of April, beginning of March, we're somewhere in some town, some city across the Midwest. In fact, I think that's the first time we had actually met face to face was in Lansing at the Deer and Turkey Expo. By any means, if a lot of times if you're interested in going to some of those expos, a lot of times you can look at the expo floor plan and actually see some of the vendors or view a vendors list. So, if there's something in your local area, check that out. We may just be there.
Yeah, I would definitely advise people to, I never took the time to go to those shows, but I'm glad that I started to because you get to meet people and put faces to names and actually put your hands on products, and very cool. And I'm looking forward to those shows again after this season. So, dude, I hope you have a successful deer hunting season to you and the other guys at Exodus. And if you get some awesome big buck trail cam photos or some, want to share any of your successful hunts on the, I think it's just hashtag digital deer camper through that lifestyle lost thing too. You guys can sign up, and it'd be great to share the deer hunting season through that venue with you. So,
heck yeah, man. Heck yeah, we'll definitely use that. Yep.
Cool. All right, Chad. Well, appreciate you taking the time to do this, and we'll stay in touch. And good luck deer hunting.
Hey, man. Thanks. Same to you. Appreciate the opportunity to be on the show.
Okay. Talk to you.
See ya.